Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Marianne, for that kind introduction, and thank you all for letting me join you. This seems I've seen the syllabus for this seminar this semester. Seems like an awesome seminar. I wish I could be taking it with you all semester as well. Seems like really cool stuff that you're getting to engage with, and thank you also for the discussion comments that Bet had forwarded along. But I enjoyed looking through those as well, and seeing kind of some of the reactions people had to the topics for this week. So I kind of was thinking I would talk pretty informally about a little bit about how I got connected to University of Florida, which Marianne was describing a little bit of as well, and then about kind of where this paper came from or where it fits into to other things that I've been thinking about. But I hope that most of the time that we have together we can use for discussion as well. Marianne makes it sound like she's like, well, Greg was there first, but of course Marianne was there first, and I have here my copy of Contested Frontiers, and I first encountered this book when I was in grad school, when I was doing an exchange in the anthropology department at Stanford, actually, and Lisa Curran, who's worked mostly in Indonesia, but we were talking about Brazil and Indonesia and frontiers, and she went to her shelf and pulled out Contested Frontiers and said, you need to read this book. And so Marianne's work, was really helpful for me and influential for me as I was starting to think about my work in the Amazon. And so I had this background, and I had gone down to Brazil on pre-dissertation field work a summer before the year I was going into the field. And that was when I went to Mato Grosso, I went to Pará, but I also went through Brasilia, and there at UNIB, at University of Brasilia, I met Fabiano Toni, who is a University of Florida PhD alumnus from the political science program, I think, but I think Marianne was on his committee, right? Right. And so Fabiano he's a professor in the Center for Sustainable Development, of which there's a picture here at CDS at UNIB. And when I was then preparing to go back for my dissertation fieldwork, Fabiano graciously agreed to host me at UNIB. And so I was working, I had an shared office space there at the Institute, and I would meet with Fabiano from time to time, and some of the other folks that he was involved with. So the Florida network was also active there at CDS. And Fabiano had written a book about municipal environmental governance in the Amazon, actually, with David Kamowitz, with some C4 connections. And this was, I forget when that book came out, but Fabiano had been looking at kind of municipal level environmental governance questions previously as well. So that a bit of background, and then as Marianne describes, when I was there in the field during my dissertation research, and I think I was talking with some of the people at the Nature Conservancy in Belém, who said, they said, oh, have you heard about, Marianne Schmink or something like that? And I said, Marianne's coming back. And I said, oh, really? Marianne's coming back? And we ended up getting connected with each other. And it was an incredible opportunity to join the research team that Marianne was leading, and to meet Jeff and Valerio, and to work in the field with that group as well. So I just have a few thoughts, I guess, about where this paper came from, this governance frontier paper. I was there at UNIB, and Fabiano had a PhD student was Cecilia Viana, who's the other co-author on this paper. And Cisa had done work in Paragominas, and she was interested also in municipalities in the Amazon, the question of the priority list. And after a few months, at some point, Fabiano brought us all together, and Fabiano had previously had a master's student who had done his thesis in Lucas, and so brought us together to talk about, well, Paragominas and Lucas and São Felix, these kind of model municipalities for environmental governance. What's going on here? Is there some kind of a story that we could tell? And we talked that through, initially framing this idea just around Lucas, Paragominas, and São Felix, all places where the Nature Conservancy had worked, places that had become these kind of key nodes of environmental governance at the municipal level. And I actually wrote the first draft of this paper when I was in Santarém, there with my tacacá and caipirinha. It was raining. This is March, yeah. So it was raining quite a lot. So I was stuck in the hotel in the rain most of the time, and I wrote a first draft of this paper. And so, as I said, I was thinking about it as we were talking about, okay, what's up with model municipalities and environmental governance? And I think one of the issues we were dealing with as we were thinking about comparing Lucas and Paragominas and São Felix was this question of, Lucas is a post-frontier municipality, or Paragominas is a post-frontier municipality, but São Felix would be an active frontier municipality in southeastern Pará. But what did it really mean to say that a municipality was pre or post-frontier, on the frontier, and how should governance then be different depending on these other supposedly frontier or post-frontier characteristics? And the broader question that I was really interested in was the question of regional political economic transformations, trying to think about at a broader scale, what was changing in the Brazilian Amazon, these declining deforestation rates according to PRODES, and cultural intensification that was happening. So I was trying to link these questions to a sort of regional level of thinking, and where I ended up on that is this land sparing complex article published last year in Annals that I think was, you have a reference for it there in the syllabus too. And so that kind of frames how I was trying to approach these municipalities, but we didn't quite get it at that point. We weren't able to fit everything together. And the paper got sent out and it got rejected. We had some good comments. I set it aside for a while. I came back to it. And what really actually ended up making things click was this follow the policy methodology that Peck and Theodore had developed. And I had read that paper at some point, and I came back to it when I was working on my dissertation. And the way that they talked about following the policy and policy development as a spatial process really helped clarify for me how to think about these three different municipalities and talk about them together. And at that point, we realized, as I started thinking about following the policy, that Santarém had to come into the story as well as an earlier experience for the Nature Conservancy in the development of this sort of green governance regime or set of policies. So I was thinking about following the policy, and I wanted to think now about the spatiality of governance, how governance is, and here, as you can see in the paper, I was pushing it back against this formulation that often makes governance seem like something very abstract that's just imposed from above and then it's there. And this is the frontier governance formulation that I specifically, referencing Nepstad and colleagues who, say the frontier's out there and we need to govern it, as opposed to paying more attention to the different sort of relations of governance and how imposing governance looks different in different places, and develops dynamically in relation to other dimensions. So that's kind of the thought process that came into rethinking the paper and getting this sort of linking of governance and frontiers through following the policy approach. And this was sort of crystallized when I came last fall, in fall of 2017, to University of Florida at Marianne's invitation, and gave a talk that was really the nucleus of this paper. And so, at that point, we're talking about we're talking about Santarém, and here's the Cargill port on the Tapajós and Santarém that was contributing to expanding soy in the Santarém and Belterra municipalities, and one of TNC's early responsible soy projects. And then talking about Lucas do Rio Verde, here, real center of the soy economy in north central Mato Grosso, where again, at this point, TNC had developed a municipal level approach, and they Cadastro Ambiental Rural sort of emerged in part through the experiences in Lucas and Mato Grosso, and CISA was the one who had greater experience in Paragominas, but Paragominas was the first municipality to exit the priority list, and then this brought us up to São Félix do Xingu, and the kind of more recent frontier experiences that I've been studying and also working on with Marianne and company. And so I had now this new concept from the Florida presentation, and then this special section of World Development came out on Frontiers at the beginning of 2018, and there's this Rasmussen and Lund and the various articles in this special section of World Development talking about the resource frontier. And there was also this AAG session on frontiers this past spring that I participated in, and so I was like, okay, frontiers are having their moment, and again, and I can frame this around this world development issue, and I was pretty dissatisfied, I think, as you can probably also tell, with the very post-structuralist resource frontier framework that Rasmussen and Lund had developed. I wanted a bit more structure because I wanted to think about these regional transformations. So everywhere is different and things happen differently everywhere, but I wanted to say something a bit more systemic. So that's kind of how the paper came to take its form, and I think you can probably, if you're familiar with the paper that Marianne led along with Jeff Valerio and myself, you can link this paper with that article, which gives a much longer term view of multiple dimensions of frontier change in São Félix, so sort of a more longer term historical and microscopic view. And I guess a more macroscopic view, moving back from this sort of following the policy at the municipal level, would be the land sparing complex annals article that I wrote, where and that's where I really kind of lay out what I think this governance regime is, what I think this green governance order is that we see expanding along with, in articulation with, intensive agriculture, and and infrastructure and other kind of socio-political dimensions in the Amazon. So my argument there, just very briefly, was that that these policies aiming to restrict deforestation and to increase agricultural production through agricultural intensification, which is a land-sparing idea, there was a coherent sort of policy framework that was aiming to shift the economy in the Brazilian Amazon towards this intensive agro-industrial model, and this diagram kind of lays out how I was arguing that these policies fit that protected area creation and enforcing forest code requirements, especially legal reserve and permanent, APP, área protegida permanente requirements were combining with tenure regularization intensification support to constrict the available area for agricultural expansion and drive agricultural intensification with goals that brought together a number of different actors that brought together state agencies, agribusiness companies, and farmers, large farmers or landowners, and NGOs, environmental NGOs, around these three different goals of forest conservation, socioeconomic development, and state building, that they could all pursue these goals together. And so that's kind of the broader, sort of what do I think this governance frontier is producing in these places? That would be the twinned article. And then I guess the question that I am wondering about, thinking about, is what's going to happen if and when land-sparing governance is dismantled, right? This moment from 2004 to 2012, when deforestation was declining, and it has remained at lower levels, although creeping upwards. But we have a very real possibility of kind of a massive new push of infrastructure and agricultural expansion, resource extraction in the Amazon, and so what will happen if land-sparing governance is dismantled? I would expect more road construction, more land grabbing, and speculative deforestation. Probably extensive ranching expanding again, as it always has along within that kind of extensive frontier framework, and possibly also soy expanding even over forest area again, as it did prior to 2006, 2007. So that's kind of looking ahead, not super promising. And I think the last thing I'd mention about kind of how, thinking about the sociology of Amazonian research here, the Florida connection on a personal level are influential to me, but also I'm involved. Our Latin American Studies Center here at the University of Georgia just was renewed as a national resource center, and we're trying to think about having a Brazil natural resource governance initiative that I and my colleague Don Nelson, who's an anthropologist here at UGA, who works in the Cerrado primarily on water governance. We're trying to think about developing this Brazil natural resource governance initiative, and very much trying to learn from, connect with, be inspired by what has been done at the University of Florida with the Tropical Conservation and Development Program. So I think, University of Florida is really a reference, both for the people, the scholars who are there, and the programs that have been developed, and the students who have come through over the years. So I feel lucky to have been able to get plugged in, or to piggyback on that network as well. But that's kind of what I had prepared as a presentation, and I would love to have a conversation with you all.